Okay, we are back, and I am Margie Taylor, your host for Conroe Culture News, and we were just talking with Julie Martineau about the Montgomery County Community Foundation and all the grants and designated funds, scholarship, long-term disaster recovery, but we also wanted to say how we can get involved. So what is the best way to get involved? And I know you also have fundraisers that you do, and you just had one.
Right.
You had a shootout.
We've had our 20th annual shootout this past summer in the
20.
beautiful heat of August, at the end of August.
I hate August.
August can be rough outside.
Yeah, right. The only good news is, Blackwood Gun Club's really good about having lots of trees. So
they're good people.
They are very good. They do a good job out there. And so we had a lot of shooters, a lot of teams, good time, live auction. And then what's coming up in February is our wine dinner. So
Gifts of the
you
Vine.
can shoot things up or you can enjoy wine, because it's a true wine dinner with everything perfectly paired with the menu.
Oh,
so
nice.
we're working on that right now, and those fundraisers underwrite our administrative costs, so we don't have to charge our funds, and we can keep growing the funds so that we can put more money out for the nonprofits, so that the nonprofits can have more money in their granting request. So, if you're interested in any of that, you can go to our website. It's at mccfoundation.org. And look on events, and you can see the photos of the wine dinner and the shootout. And we'll be getting up the wine dinner information probably within the next few weeks. So thanks. Appreciate
It's a great
you
organization.
Me have some time.
Yeah. So now we're going to talk about board of directors. So that's why I have you all here, because I think it's an interesting discussion, because I think there's much variety in boards. Right, Jennifer? Yeah. We're now joined by Jennifer Landers. She's the executive director of Community Assistance Center, which used to be Montgomery County Mercy Assistance, used to be Crisis Assistance Center. Anything else? Am I missing anything?
We're not changing it.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Not
people
this
still
week.
call it the wrong name. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. So you're leading the pack there, along with your team, which does a great job. You've got a lot of good people that are working with you, both on your board and your staff and volunteers. So, and of course, you've had some funds from the Montgomery County Community Foundation.
Yes.
Okay,
For
I thought so.
For a long time, we've been
Yes.
very blessed by them. So.
It's a wonderful organization. So, and again, we have Sandy Barton, who is the president of the Greater Magnolia Parkway Chamber of Commerce. And you also have a board of directors.
Sure do. Great one.
So I feel connected to all of you in one
You
way
are,
or
actually.
another. I am. Yeah, I know. Isn't that funny?
We've all sucked you in one way or another.
Yeah,
Yes.
probably.
Yes.
That's probably true. So let's talk about boards. We've had good boards and bad boards. And we won't name people. But what makes a good board?
Well, I mean, for us, it is engagement. It is diversity. It is a willingness to understand the responsibilities of both a working and a strategic board, and having our board members engaged to help further the mission of the organization. That's not always that easy to find within a particular community. Further, we want to make certain that we have a very diverse set of expertise that can bring a different perspective into the conversation. Having all small business owners on a chamber board, might be helpful, but if they don't bring different areas of expertise, it doesn't really help the organization to grow and thrive.
Yes,
which
to help
is
grow.
sort of the underlying unwritten message of a board. It's their responsibility to make sure that organization is going not only to continue, but to continue to grow and continue to thrive in a manner that's consistent with the organization's mission.
And you've been with Chambers for how long?
Me, 15 years now.
Quite a while.
Yeah, a little while.
Yes. And then Jennifer, you have had different boards, and do you agree with what Sandy's saying?
I would.
And do they all have different responsibilities?
I would, and our board's a little bit different right now than a lot. Obviously, we're coming off of a rebrand and a name change, and our organization as a whole is really kind of transforming. And so, who we looked at for our board 5 years ago is not who we're looking at for our board now.
That's good, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Don't you
And
think?
we needed folks that are active and that are, I mean, our board is a working board, so it's not namesakes, it's not, buying board positions with donations or anything like that. It's everybody is very engaged in the process. And the neat thing right now is we have a really great culture on our board that everyone seems to get along very well, has a great time together, and we get a lot of business done at the same time. So it's an interesting feel whenever we bring consultants or other folks in for different parts of our meeting, because our board, is all having a good time. They're like, I've never seen a board that's doing this together. So we all...
They're very cohesive.
They're very cohesive, and the board and staff have the same, unity and vision of what we're doing, where we're going, and how we're going to get there. So I think that's pretty important too. But I agree with everything that you said. That's very, very important.
One of the things I want to highlight that Sandy said, and Jennifer really has touched on what she's doing, but I think needs to be brought out very specifically, is part of the job of the board, and in partnership with staff, is to really be thinking about the future. Mm-hmm. And the hardest thing for any organization to do is say, is the model we've got now the right model for 5 years from now? Because it's so easy to go, and I kind of got a little of that, is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. Mm-hmm. And while that there is some merit to that, if you don't see the change in the world occurring, you're going to get left behind. And your business model, and I've seen this happen with nonprofits who at one time were just, the be-all. I mean, everybody wanted to be like them. And just take IBM business model. Right. IBM thought that they dominated the world, and then PCs became the thing, and they could not change. So nonprofits have to, and the board have to be thinking about what's happening in the donation landscape, in the service delivery landscape, all of that membership. Absolutely. How do you cast
the needs
forward?
of the people change.
Well,
whatever your target audience is.
Right. And stay out of the minutia.
Well, and it's being able to be flexible as an organization. And that's almost necessary these days with either a for-profit organization or a non-for-profit.
True.
Is that you can't be so tied to what you do today. You have to be able to be willing to look inside at what you're doing today and be willing to say, well, just because we did it that way yesterday doesn't mean it's the right thing for us today or tomorrow. And we have to be willing, to change, because all of us like to say, oh, well, we already did that last year, so we can do it again this year. But it might not be the right thing for the organization this year or next year. And we have to be able to, be willing to look at ourselves and say, time for us to change. Mm-hmm.
So how often should you relook at your mission or vision?
I think every time you do a strategic plan, you need to look at it and say, is this still valid? Mm-hmm. The challenge in nonprofits is, do you have a 3 or a 5 year strategic plan? And I have business people that go back and forth between 3, 5, 10 year. But you really ought to be looking at it seriously. I think that often. On all my board material, I've got our mission and our vision, so that when they're looking at their agenda and stuff, they see that, to keep it kind of front and center.
I think that's important. I mean, we do the same thing.
I would say about every 3 to 5 years for sure, but we look at our mission statement, I would say almost daily, because I think everything you do has to really stay mission-centered, and you have to be careful. You were talking about being flexible, and I think that's important, but not to creep into what other folks are doing. One thing in our organization is extensive. We cover a lot of ground, but the thing is, there are people who are experts in parts of what's happening. For example, domestic violence. That's not our area. We don't want to do that. We want to use the experts, so we partner with the experts. We utilize the Women's Center for things like that. And so I think it's important for current nonprofits, more so than for-profits, but just to be careful of mission creep, and kind of, our board was talking at our retreat recently about staying in your lane, and doing what you do and doing what you do best, and then letting the other folks come in and help and partner and do what they do best.
Yeah, I agree. Mission creep can be deadly to an organization, because your resources need to be devoted to those things that fall within your mission, and it can be very easy. Great ideas don't necessarily fit within an organization's mission. I mean, just because it's a great idea, that's great. We can help you find a home for it, but it's not always within the walls of the organization that is hearing that great idea. And so, yeah, I agree with you, Jennifer, mission creep. We look at it all the time. I say it all the time at almost all of our gatherings as a chamber. I mean, they hear, because we have a kind of a three-part mission, and they hear from me all the time about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. And so our mission is front and center all the time. And when we develop our plan of work because we do both a plan of work, which is, our annual plan of work, and then a strategic plan, which is different. It should be a longer term plan. Our plan of work, if it doesn't fit underneath one of the three buckets of the work that we do, then we have to seriously question it, and our board will question it. We, too, had our retreat recently, and, we had to specifically talk with our board. Is that something that we need to do?
Is that important to do that annually, for a board to have a retreat, to refocus?
Annually or every 2 years, it kind of depends.
I think it
You
depends.
do it annually?
We do now, and I think it depends on your board, kind of your mission and what's happening. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's been important. And again, what we've done each year has changed. This year, our focus was mainly on developing our board and fundraising, and giving them
And
tools.
Sandy, why are you smiling?
I'm smiling because that was our focus this
Okay.
year as well.
Good, yeah.
Our board, we're trying to help our board grow from, basically in the weeds, have to be hands-on with everything working board, to moving them into the direction of a strategic board. We're not quite there yet. That's where we know we want to be. But we not only need to develop our board and our board leadership and give them the opportunity to be somewhat hands-on but not dug in like the staff would be, but we need to develop future board leadership. And that's been something that, people may not be aware, but our organization is sort of new. We were two chambers at one point in the Magnolia community, and then in 2017 we unified. And I came on really at the end of 2017, and so for the past year and somewhat, almost 2 years, we've been working to develop all of those plans and processes, not only with regard to our plan of work and our strategic goals and our mission and vision, but in developing our board to have the kind of breadth and expertise that we need, but to also move them out of that hands-on. Both former chambers sort of had only a hands-on working board, and that's great.
That's a burnout too.
But it these are
burnout.
volunteers, and
yeah.
we need to make certain that our volunteers are well loved and well respected and well appreciated, but not burn them out, as Margie
Well,
indicated.
because you can't grow if you have your hands in the middle of it.
And what we're looking for our board to do in this coming year is to help us develop that pool of leaders in our community that are beyond themselves. So they're not the committee chair. They're asked to find others within our community to be those committee chairs and to help develop that.
So what I have found in my 40 years of nonprofit work, 30 of which have been leading nonprofits, is that I've walked into almost every organization where the board's been very, very hands-on. They want to be strategic, but it ends up being about trust. And so if you can't trust your CEO, you tend to knuckle down more and get more into the weeds. And so our jobs as executive directors, CEOs, is to constantly be communicating out to the board, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm doing it. And we, all three of us,
Transparency.
are new. We've been on
fairly
our
new.
jobs less than 3 years, each of us.
Absolutely.
So we have that unique opportunity to be able to say, okay, trust me, and they're going to trust you until you give them a really good reason
right,
not
right.
to.
Right.
But if you keep communicating and engaging them, then they're going to keep trusting you. And I find that that's when they
That's a very
back
good
away.
point.
That's one thing. The second tool that I use is I love consent agendas. And I was talking to Margie's group last week about that, is that when I can put all those reports into a consent, they get it ahead of time. I've now opened space for strategic discussions, and they love that because boards really want to do that. But if the structure of the board meeting is to have this report,
Is approvals.
Approvals of reports, then that's all they're going to do. You have to kind of help them. So I don't know if y'all are using the consent agenda model or not.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. I mean, we do our best. First, to be respectful of time, first and foremost. I mean, if I'm going to ask for an hour or two out of these very busy community leaders month, I want to make certain that we get their time and attention on the things that we really need their time and attention. So we send out all that information in advance so that they kind of know what's going on, that they've had an opportunity to read if they need to before they get there, and then hopefully all of the really business parts of that meeting are fast, and there aren't a lot of questions or concerns or anything.
Sometimes you
about
have to
that.
be a gatekeeper
Absolutely.
and monitor some of. Everybody's got a group of somebody who's going to go off on a tangent about something, no matter what it is. So you got to bring them back in.
Absolutely, but yeah, being able to understand, when we've gone off track as well.
Right.
And, have your leadership in place so that you can, keep them back.
So what is the hardest thing? Would you think that it might be micromanaging staff, the board do that, or is there any conflict of interest, or how you handle crises, or what's the hardest thing dealing with board members?
I'm really lucky in that my board really does stay out of the day-to-day, and so they don't really micromanage me or
I know that
or
can
staff.
happen.
And so, and I've seen it. I've definitely been involved in it previously, and I've
Yep,
seen
me
it
too.
places, but I'm very lucky here.
Well,
and
you're
that,
probably careful, too, to make certain that has been communicated
well, I think
clearly.
the trust is very important,
Trust is a good
number
point.
one. And number two, your board is only as good as the information they're given. So
Yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
sharing information, you're keeping people in the know, and you're very transparent, then there is no issue, and the trust is there. And so, they know if you say you're doing it, you're doing it. If your staff says they're doing it, like Julie said, until you show that you're not going to, or give them a reason not to. And so I think the hardest part is it's people, so each of these are people, and they have their own sets of issues or their own quirks or, their own busy lives. And so when you're managing all of those folks, sometimes it's hard for us just to get everybody in the room, for multiple events or for different things. We had to reschedule our board retreat for Imelda. It was set for September 19th. So we moved it to Halloween, which is not much better, but that was the closest time that we could get the bulk of folks before we're running out of year. So it's one of those, I think it's just getting that many,
What's
really
a good number?
important.
12?
I think
terms
it's
of what?
different
Board
for
members.
everybody.
It's different
That's
for every
really hard to
organization,
say.
and it depends on the breadth of your organization and what kind of
And what's in the bylaws.
roles. Well,
yeah, that too.
Well, bylaw. I mean, you obviously want to comply with your bylaws, but your bylaws can be rewritten depending on what the needs of the organization are. But some boards might be fine with 7, 8, 9 people. Some really can't go very far or exist without 25 or 30. So it really does depend on
And then
your
it's hard to get a
organization.
decision on things with that many people.
How many do y'all have on your boards?
We have 15.
Okay.
I have 16.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many do you have?
We're at 16 right now, but we're in the process of adding. So I think we will have an odd number when we're finished. But we, are kind
Yeah.
of replacing some folks that are getting ready to roll. And
Right.
so
And
Yeah.
that brings up a good point. Term limits are really, I think, important.
Correct.
I've worked with a number of nonprofits that the people that were on the board had been on the board for 20 years, and you get stale. And I've seen that in one board
seen
that
it
I
a
took
lot, too.
over, and again, it got back to trust. They didn't trust that the organization was going to do what they needed to do, so they stayed on the board to keep managing it. And then once you can give them a reason why to get off, you can get them off.
I have one that's been on our board on and off for about 16 years. And I would say we joke and say is not allowed to go anywhere. We have him chained to the desk because he is our governance guru. And so, I mean, our bylaws are committed to memory for him. Everything is there. He's been a case manager at times when we needed him during disaster or different things, but it is important because you do have to have those different you wanted to have flexibility to travel. So we're allowing it for now.
How kind of you.
I know. Big steps for us. But he, he brings so much to the table and honestly has made himself invaluable. So we just can't imagine a world where he's not engaged in some capacity.
Well, that's,
So-
I think that's the hardest thing is that, when you look, what's that old adage, if you need something done, ask a busy person. Okay.
They need to quit asking me.
And
Well, you're the epitome
well,
of busy.
yeah, but that's, that's probably the most difficult thing with regard to, it's not finding people who are interested or people who are willing to get engaged or people who bring, diverse sets of skills to an organization or who don't have great ideas. Those things, you can find them. But the challenge is those people are just really busy people. And keeping them engaged by, being respectful of their time, keeping them engaged by, finding them tasks that, that will, allow them to be engaged at the level that makes sense for them and doesn't discourage them. I think that's really a difficult and fine line for a lot of execs to work on, because you want to keep those really great people, and you want to keep them engaged, and yet you don't want them to go away because they've had enough of you, right? I mean, that's really the name of the game. I mean,
That's my problem.
Yeah,
They see me coming. Yeah.
Oh, well,
Well, it's too late for you, Julie.
I swear,
You have a reputation.
I try to switch up how I use my phone, to call, because it's like if they see it's Sandy Barton calling, they're like, oh, call him back later. Call him back later. I know what she's asking for. I know it. But that's I think that's one of the hardest things. I mean, is just trying to find a way to make certain that, the people on your board feel that they can be engaged at a level that their time permits.
Well, and that, for me, that speaks to how you onboard people.
Right.
One of the things I do is I like to meet one-on-one with people before they get on my board, because I want to know why. And I want to know what they like doing so that I make their volunteer experience the kind of experience that they want. And that I'm not expecting them to do X when they really want to do Y. Nothing's more frustrating to a board. So you got to know who your board members are, what they want out of it. And frankly, I've had a couple people that they've said, I just want this organization's name on my resume. And I'm like, okay, so this is the kind of thing I'm going to have you do.
Yeah.
Or you give them an assignment and they're up front, they're good with that. But, as long as I know that that's what it's about, then
Then you're
and they're
okay with
representing a particular industry that I needed on the board or whatever. It's an interesting balance. Managing and working with boards and volunteers is very different, and people don't realize that. Very different than managing employees.
Absolutely.
They feel if you know how to manage an employee, you can manage volunteers, and that is not true.
Nope.
They're a whole different
skill
animal.
sets. They really are.
Agreed.
And it's really hard when you only have a staff of you and another person.
Yeah.
I know Family Promise is that way too. So Marilyn Kazmierski is been around the community a lot, and that has its own issues, right, Sandy?
Right. Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And that's one of our challenges is, we still do need some of that working board because if you've got a very, very small staff, you really can't get to everything. There's, there's just not, enough resource, in a couple of staff people to be able to execute everything. So you really do need that working board element, but really you have to be respectful of people's time.
And try to bring in other people.
Well, and one of the things that I talked with the group about last week is that there's the working board, and that's usually people that have very small staffs or no staff. And then you've got your strategic board, which is how most boards, Jennifer, that's yours. Those are most of the boards that are out there. I'm just stepped down as president of Rotary House, and that board is all volunteers. So my chair of
She has a really good handout.
did a presentation. But and so people need to think about that.
Right.
That what they've got is, we're having really good discussions. But if you don't have a staff, then how are you a board that is both in the day-to-day and casting strategically forward? Right. And I have to say, Assistance League is one of the best that I've seen.
Oh, yeah.
At doing that. They
Huge.
are a well-oiled machine. They have a beautiful succession plan pipeline that they build and develop. They know what they're doing, how they want to do it.
They're very
And so-
strong.
And
too.
it's amazing because they all only have 1-year terms. There's nobody who has
Yes.
multiple year
Yes,
terms, which
really.
is something
That's phenomenal.
The fluidity and the way they just continue to do it is always impressive to
Yes.
me because
They always
a lot
seem
of times
together,
it seems
too. They
choppy
seem
or
very
jumpy when it's
cohesive.
like that.
So we only have a couple minutes. Couple things I wanted to bring up. So, do you believe that all the board members should have a monetary contribution at
Yes.
some level?
Yes.
Of course.
I
But a
think
lot of
they,
them
they
don't.
should be your
They should
key
know that from the
fundraisers.
start.
They should know that.
It
That
should
from
be
the
very
start.
upfront.
They should also conflict of interest. What does that mean?
They need to be upfront about it. Just because they serve on multiple boards doesn't mean they can't do it, but they need to understand what their responsibility is with each board and what the protection is for every
yeah,
board.
and just understanding. I agree with that, Jennifer. They need to understand that that their loyalties when they're in the boardroom of that organization
saying,
belong
Julie.
with that organization, and they can't carry it out nor carry others in. And I think that's that has to be very clear as well. That we understand that you're coming forward with additional expertise from another nonprofit, but that doesn't mean that that's what can be applied here, nor can you take what's going on within this boardroom out to somebody else's boardroom.
Absolutely.
Agree.
So, last question: board versus trustees. What is the difference between a board of directors and having trustees?
So, in the state of Texas, there's a legal difference. If you're a board of trustees, Jennifer, are you board of directors or trustees?
We're board of directors.
Okay, and yours is directors.
Directors.
So directors have a lower level of fiduciary liability. If you're a trustee, the liability is incredibly high. If you make a erroneous or a poor decision, you as a trustee are more likely to be personally responsible. Even if you have directors and officers liability, you can be held personally responsible. Whereas as a director, you still have liability, but you're not held to that as high a level of
Such as, let's say,
accountability.
Conroe ISD. Those are
They're
trustees.
Trustees.
Yes.
Because of the
And those
public
are
funds
elected
primarily.
positions.
Because they're
Correct.
also elected that
right.
way, yeah.
Right, but they have a direct fiduciary responsibility, and they can be held liable. I mean, that has happened, recently, even within the state of Texas, where you've had boards of trustees that have been dismissed because of the lack of fiduciary responsibility toward the organization.
And that doesn't mean that there's not fiduciary responsibility
there
to a
is.
board of directors. There
Correct.
still
There
is.
is. It's just not at that same
Exactly.
level.
Same
Yeah.
level, exactly.
Well, I'm getting the wrap it up look. So, anything else y'all would like to say separately or together about the board
Just
of directors?
thank you for letting us have this conversation.
Yeah,
It's been
great.
interesting.
This has been great.
It is
Thank you,
interesting,
Margie.
and everybody has a different board and has a different perspective with a different mission and vision. And I appreciate y'all coming out here today. And remember, tomorrow is voting day.
Voting
Yes,
day.
go
Yes,
vote.
go vote.
So if you haven't voted,
already, go
there
vote.
are some things you can vote for. Not everybody gets to vote for everything, but just go vote. It
I'm just
doesn't
going to
take
put
very
a plug
long.
in for the League of Women Voters at the state level has a voter's guide on all the constitutional amendments. And
Those
they
are
give
very
you the
important.
pros and cons. So if you don't know what it means, go download that and take a look at it.
Don't
It's
just
very
go in there and
helpful.
randomly vote for
Right.
something.
do not for this
because
one.
there's one Prop 4 that if you want
Income tax.
yes,
You say
income
yes.
tax, you need to say yes. So
But
Make sure
do
you
the
read.
studying and make an evaluation on your own. Be educated before you vote.
right.
Okay, y'all have a great day. This was
too.
sponsored by Roger Stein Chiropractic, and make it wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margie.